I have with me Mr. Ed Hartman. He's a composer and music producer. Welcome, Ed. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you very much for having me on.
Uh, Thank you very much for joining us from your studio. I'm very happy to see this beautiful setting.
Yeah, I'm surrounded by instruments. I'm in Seattle, Washington, in the metro area,
Yes.
and I've been composing, teaching, performing music all my life. And more, I've been creating music for film and television. And then I've also become a producer, and not just music producer, but a film producer.
Yes.
And that's a major change for me. Yeah.
So I
So
can see from your filmography that you worked in all genres of films. I mean, you worked in long documentary, short films, independent, mainstream. Hmm?
right, and I haven't. I'm not a major scoring composer out there. I have music that's been in major films like The Blind Side and that sort of thing. That doesn't mean I scored them. I don't want anybody confused. Those
No,
were scored by some exceptional composers out there that I would never take credit for.
of
But
course.
I have been lucky enough to have tracks of music in a lot of films. I just got a few more placements over the weekend. One of them I was really exciting is in the Twilight Zone reboot,
Yeah.
and it's like a 1950s kind of a track in it, and it's in a little retro Twilight Zone scene. It's a wonderful placement where it's kind of a commercial embedded in there. So those are incredible placements that put your music in front of millions of people at a time. So I teach music licensing to composers and songwriters as well and try and get them, involved in doing that. And I think especially in this kind of an era where performing and even recording traditional methods of distribution of your own recordings is difficult and doesn't necessarily pay the bills, but music licensing is not easy, but it can access your music into huge industries that and get tremendous fan base from them as well, and make money up front and on the back end.
Of course. I want to ask you, speaking of the Twilight Zone, I mean, um, uh, it, there was other reboots. I remember I saw the original
Right.
series back in the.
Yeah.
Uh,
The original 1960s is just, I mean, the most, I think probably maybe the greatest television show I've ever seen.
yes.
And one most wonderful writing with, and it was anthology, so it had all these stars in it. The reboot in the 90s was okay. It wasn't bad. This is very different. I've only seen a few episodes, the one I did and then one other. You have to access it through CBS All Access, so it's a pay situation. It looks very good. It's Jordan Peele. I think he's the host of this
Yes.
one,
Yes.
and it's intense. And they don't have the same issues of censorship or anything like that. So there's language in there. The subject matter is more mature.
Mhm.
It's very well done. I mean, it's movie level as far as production, as far as I can tell. It all comes down to writing in my mind for that type of a show. In the original show, there was something about the black and white, just the raw acting that was in that I think continues to make it such a classic. You can watch that show forever. And in fact, lately on Facebook and on social media, I've been posting one particular episode about post Armageddon, the old man in the cave, where the people will stop wanting to eat the canned food because it's of a nuclear attack, and it is probably the most right on thing you can watch right now if you're wondering, should I wear a mask? So I encourage everybody to watch that episode.
Speaking of apocalypse, I remember this episode. The star. Do you remember the old man who used to train Sylvester Stallone in Rocky, the first Rocky
Yeah,
film.
Burgess Meredith.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Burgess
yeah. He
Meredith.
was in a number of those.
Yes,
Yeah,
he was in one episode, and he used to work in a bank, in
yeah.
downstairs, and some kind of nuclear bomb exploded.
That's right.
And
Yeah,
when he climbed up, to the surface, he discovered that he lost his glass. Although he was in a library, he cannot read. He used to be like a
that's right.
like they say, bookworm. So that was,
That is probably one of the most classic episodes of all time. And
yeah,
he has he's finally has time to read, and then his glasses break.
yes.
It's like, oh god, that's the twist on that one. But that's intense. I mean, that's amazing. Yeah.
At that time, I remember as well, there was Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and later on in the 70s, I was a very big fan of the Night Gallery, if you remember.
Oh yes, very much. Yeah.
Also an anthology, and it was very touching as well. But
Yeah. It never quite. I mean, it was good as it was. I don't think it ever quite reached the same length as Twilight Zone.
of course,
And I don't know. I can't really identify why. There's I almost think black and white has a
impact.
part of that.
Yeah,
Color is reality. Black and white is fiction.
yeah,
And this kind of leads me to the project that I'm involved in. If I can make a transition here,
sure.
as a producer. I got involved in a very unique project through my teaching. A student of mine from years ago, his mother started to take some lessons from me. And she saw that I was a composer, and I had put a track of mine, kind of a Danny Elfman, Pee Wee Herman like score against an old Buster Keaton clip,
Mhm.
College, a wonderful film. I'm a big Keaton fan. And she saw that I had music to this silent film, and it turns out she's the great niece of Lyford, who was a filmmaker who started in Seattle, and he had made 9 films before he was 20 and written 58 stage and screenplays. That's just an astounding number. And then he went on to work for Disney, and he directed an Academy Award-winning documentary called The Titan, and I have show and tell here.
Yes,
This is The Titan.
yes.
Anyway,
Mhm.
and it was in 1950. And then he actually did work in the Mideast for Saudi Arabia, oil company, and different things over there. He did quite a bit of interesting thing that's worth a chat later. But anyway, I got involved in this thing, and she asked me to score it, and I did. And then and this is a black and white silent science fiction film called As the Earth Turns.
Yes.
When I got it, it was about 33 minutes. It was we had film footage, 16 millimeter, and she had taken over the film estate of this guy through her son, or his son, Richard Lyford's son, and got involved in it, and I wound up kind of getting drafted to be producer. And so I went from score composer, scoring this thing, to editor. I found another, I don't know, 15 minutes in the movie or more, about 15 minutes. Anyway, it's now 45 minutes or so, and took it through the festival circuit.
Mhm.
To date, it's been at 121 festivals. It's won 135 awards and nominations. I've gotten 34 for best score, and those are astounding numbers. So I had support to put it in those festivals. This is not necessarily a cheap thing to do, but there are lots of tricks that I'm happy to share with people on that.
Yeah.
Through Film Freeway specifically, a lot of people are not necessarily aware. We really did a lot of research with this, and then since then, the film has been into distribution. Before that in the fall we did a 7-day Oscar qualifying run, which is just off the charts crazy. 1938, unreleased film, silent film. What in the heck's going on here? But it was never released, and the reason was, in the first 20 years, he had done this when he was 20. And this is a major achievement. And he did this with zero budget, nothing, not a nothing.
Yeah.
And he did it with his friends and all the rest of it. He'd been a member of the American Cinematographers League, Amateur Cinematographers League. He entered contests, things like that, and he was doing 60 millimeter film. He was developing his own film, and the stories go on and on. Anyway, and this was the last amateur project that he ever did. And then he went on to work for Disney, and he never really was able to distribute anything like this. And it's not necessarily perfect. I mean, it has a little bit of a Flash Gordon quality to it. I'd say, you know, some people might say it's a little Ed Wood-like, but,
Yes.
you know, that's it. But the difference is Ed Wood was kind of like schmaltz or whatever, you know, schlocky is fine.
Yes.
Richard really tried hard to make things come off, and I would call it more similar to Things to Come of that era as a film.
Yes.
It's serious, and it's a well-written story. He was such a good writer, and especially when you have a silent film, it's amazing if you can, you know, have a story really resonate like that. Anyway, it came out really well, and we did the South Court qualifying run. We entered it in the Oscars. As far as I know, at least 1,000 members have a DVD of the film. I know for a fact that Mr. Spielberg and Mr. Scorsese at some point should have that DVD from last year. And that's all I can ask for in life with my score. So since then, we got a distribution through Indie Rights, which is a wonderful distributor.
Yeah.
And they put it on Amazon. Right now it's on Google Play and YouTube Movies. And we're just kind of getting rolling with that. And then the big thing is, starting in the fall, through a connection that I made myself, it's going to be on Turner Classic Movies starting in September, and that's massive. Now, if I can do an online on-screen interview, that would be wonderful for that. I'm not sure if that's going to happen. With COVID, these things change. Although what's kind of interesting about that is historically, if this was last year, I would have had to fly to Atlanta for something like that. But my guess is if I was going to do something with them, it would be as easy as this. So in fact, when you think about how the pandemic affects things, I'm not convinced that everything is negative. The fact that I'm working with you is a result of the pandemic. Nobody knew what Zoom was before this event.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, a handful of people, and that's why I got stuck in that company. But I'm telling you, this has changed the whole game, how we're communicating, the fact that we can, you know, I don't know why we're waiting this long for video, you know, phones and all the rest of it. Most of us resist it, but I think we're getting used to it, and you can certainly design a background very easily now. So I think these types of things are going to really help networking and communication as far as what we're doing. The problem is going to be in production, actual production, and you have humans next to each other in intimate settings and things like that. Yes. So anyway, that's where I'm at right now, and just enjoying the hell out of this production and getting it out. I still have a lot of work to do with PR, and I appreciate this kind of interview because it does bring the story out. And the film is the best way to get a hold of me, or through that, or it's through astheearthturns.com. So anyway, that's that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yes. I think regarding video call, I think it was only in the old Star Trek episodes. You know, I never think about it. You know, in the old classic television shows like The Outer Limits, maybe, or Star Trek.
Right.
But
well, what's interesting about, you said Star Trek, right?
Yeah.
What's interesting about that is my mother's cousin was Harve Bennett, who was an incredible producer in Hollywood.
Yeah.
He produced Mod Squad, $6 Million Man, Rich Man, Poor Man. It goes on. Mm-hmm. And then he actually wrote and produced Star Trek 2 through 6, which is what saved Star Trek, because the first movie tanked at the theater, and he saved all things Star Trek, including everything up through today, Picard and everything else. That's all a result. He was like the fifth Beatle. He's the reason why Star Trek still exists. Anyway, when I was a kid, we took a trip to LA, and we got a personal tour at Paramount.
Yeah.
And he gave us a tour. Actually, Danny Thomas's son gave us a tour, mm-hmm. And I saw Star Trek being filmed, mm-hmm. an actual episode of that with Klingons fighting, the whole bit, and the scenery was absolute cardboard. It looked totally ridiculous, you know. So that the suspension of belief is very strong. You know, it's not about technical quality. It's not about CGI. It's about storytelling always. If
Yeah.
you have a strong story, people will believe anything you put in front of them. One of the problems we have in this country right now, so
You know,
politically.
here in Egypt, I saw the first Star Trek in cinema and the second one, the
Yeah,
Wrath of Khan.
Wrath
But
of Khan.
really, I was young, maybe 10, 12 years old. mm, And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't got it very much, although I saw before when I was younger the Star Wars and the Empire Strikes Back.
Right, right.
But really, when you start to see Star Trek movies, you must try to see before the old television series because there are a lot of references and characters'
Right.
background to indulge you into this universe, I think. And
That's right.
even The Wrath of Khan, when I grew up, I discovered that there was an original episode with Ricardo
With
Montalban, and this
yeah,
movie, is some kind of a sequel to the episode or continuation of the story. Uh,
that's right. That's
yeah,
right.
yeah,
What was that? When I was in LA last year, I took a tour of Paramount when I was
yeah.
in town for a festival, and actually, got to see that studio again. And that was almost like, I hate to say, I don't even want to say how many years, but it was almost to the date. I mean, it was a wild situation there. So, in the Twilight Zone episode that my music's in,
Yes,
there's characters from the original series in that.
excellent.
So that one draws back, and I had heard about that they were kind of doing some of the similar episodes, which is always because that's where the strong writing is. Serling was just expert writer, as was Gene Roddenberry, and I mean I've just one binging on Picard. That's an incredible series. It's really well made. The
Yes,
music's wonderful.
I saw it. Actually,
I,
I liked it very much, and as well, when you see it, you must have a little bit background about
yeah.
Star Trek generation and stuff like that. And I hope at some point they can get again Captain Kirk with them, in in an alternate universe or something.
Who knows what's coming next on that one? They almost killed off Picard in that one, but no.
Yeah. Uh,
um, yeah,
yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to ask you, since you are with us and you are a music composer, I want to ask you like a technical question about
sure.
how do you start to compose and to fine tune for a new project? Usually, do you start from the script or you need to see the footage first of the film? Ha-
I've been writing a lot about this lately in articles and
yeah,
newsletters. Every film is a different process, and every filmmaker that I work with has a different thing. Now, of course, the film I did, the director was deceased, which made it difficult. And an interesting aside on that is I found out about halfway through scoring that he had devised a way of dual turntables synchronized to a 60 millimeter film projector, sorry. And that was the first experiments with sound with 60 millimeter film in the world. And that's what got him into Disney. Anyway, I found out he had been exploring music with film, and that put me into shock because I didn't know what kind of music he liked, and there's no way to find out. Turns out my classical score was very close to what his original thoughts were about. He loved Stravinsky and Dvorak, so I was actually pretty right on there.
mhm.
So as far as modern filmmaking, where you actually have a live filmmaker, the question is, what it's chicken or the egg. Now, there is one outlier there. There's a film called Kuyana Squatsi, which was I can't remember the name of the filmmaker. Anyway, but Philip Glass, who's a wonderful minimalist composer, very serious composer, wound up collaborating with him absolutely 50-50, in which case they devised the music and the images at the exact same time. That's an interesting concept I'd love to try with filmmakers in the future. And, as opposed to a filmmaker coming to me with a project and say, I need music for this. It's a very different process. Now, those are interesting. There's a whole series of those films that were made. They're experimental by nature, but they're incredible. And you want to have good headphones with those or good speakers,
Yeah.
as with my movie. But most of the time, the filmmaker has a story, and that can be a lookbook, it can be a screenplay, it can be scenes that have been filmed, it can be a final cut, or at least a close to final cut.
Yeah.
I would say most filmmakers opt for the last concept, where they've made the movie and then they find a composer to score the picture. The downside of that is that the film is locked, so the music has to lock in with the picture as far as synchronization. That limits the scoring. Now, an interesting alternative to that, if you look at Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Steven Spielberg, John Williams, wonderful collaboration, he wrote that piece ahead of the CGI CGI, excuse me, the special effects, not CGI, that were created at that time, because they weren't done. And that's, I think, one reason why that last scene is a incredibly musically artistic piece of music. You can play that in a concert and it makes sense. And that's why the whole thing, it almost like really stretches your concepts of science on that. You're thinking, boy, they're building an entire scene of communications with aliens based on melodic passages. I mean, who came up with that? Mm-hmm. So that's an example of where artistry can be through collaboration. Again, most filmmaking is, I'm going to get X and I'm going to be asked to synchronize music to that. In which case, it's probably going to take me 5 to 10 times through the film to get any one particular scene correct. Yeah, quite likely. That's acceptable. That's what it takes. It's not easy, and you have to be very patient, and you have to have no ego, because you have to look at the music as servicing the film project and the end result of the story. And being a composer and not a producer, one reason I'm becoming a producer is I don't have control over any of those things. All I can do is offer music to it and hope it works. Mm-hmm. Now, a filmmaker can supply me with what are called temps or reference pieces that may even be synchronized to the film. In fact, even more intense is when they use they sync a temp in there to the temp, where they sync the footage to that. Then I'm asked to actually synchronize to something that's been synchronized already. I actually did a web series track for somebody in Vancouver where they had Carmina Burana against a scene they had done it to. In about 3 hours, I was able to come out with an orchestral Carmina Burana style piece that was synchronized to that action. That was not easy to do, because musically there's ebb and flow to the musical form, but it had to also fit a prearranged thing. So that's all part of the challenges of film scoring. So, there's really no good answer on that. My recommendation is that you involve the score composer as early as possible in the project, and that can be literally be in pre-production. You're going to be better off because they're going to be more collaborative about it. You may even figure out ways of involving them as producer in some ways. If you don't have a lot of cash, by offering, co-producer or something like that, they're at least going to be entitled to some back-end revenue, which, unless it's a feature that actually gets distribution, they're not going to see any back-end revenue. And there's a lot of people that are getting composers to do things for nothing, and that's, the way it is. But so again, there's many choices you can make, but I would say as early as possible so that they get a sense of what's going on. Now, if you ask them on early and you don't have a budget, I don't know. I'm not so crazy about that. I've had that happen to me. I'm like, well, look, call me when you have money, because I just can't afford to work for free. I tell people I'll work for, on any number of budgets, but I'm not going to work for free. It's just, this is my business, any more than I would ask, a plumber to come over for free either.
Yes, yes.
So,
Yes, what I would like to add that, music, I think, in the soundtrack area has contributed to the success, to many things, and also to the attachment of certain films in music, in film history. If we can say an example like The Exorcist, Star Wars, Superman with, Jerry Goldsmith, Thomas Newman, John Williams, you mentioned. I was in another interview talking about Giorgio Moroder, of course, and electronic music. So, I think sometimes part of the success of a film is the soundtrack. Either it is music or a compilation of songs,
Yeah.
or redistribution of archive, correct?
That's right, and you can have a soundtrack recording that can be something you can offer the composer to, profit on after the if you don't again if you have a lower budget. You one trick about that is as opposed to hiring a composer work for hire, where you just say, well, okay, you're gonna supply us with music, we're gonna own it. That might be a nice ego boost for an independent filmmaker, but realistically, do you have a music publisher that can join BMI, ASCAP, or a PRO, or you even know what a PRO is, to collect that back end revenue if it actually achieves broadcast or theatrical outside the United States? uh, Unless you have that in place, that money is lost. So you might as well give it to the composer. I mean, if I can lobby for the composer there, that's one way to do it. Yeah, again, it may not be a great amount of revenue, but it's something that helps on there. In this case, with the silent film, I took over the LLC for the film estate. I actually own it now, and so I own this film outright, and I can benefit from that as well, from not only the music revenue but the film itself. You know, so again, there's many tricks on there. But anyway, instead of work for hire, you can license the entire score. It can be perpetual. It can be forever. It's locked in with the movie. It just means that they will own the publishing. There's two sides to ownership. There's the writer's side and the publishing. The writers has to do the creation of the music. Once it's written down or recorded, it becomes kind of a published piece. If I were working for Warner Brothers, they would hire me on the writer's side of thing. I would probably get writer's royalties in the future, but they would take over the publishing and benefit from that. But they're going to pay me, I don't know, $50 to $1 million for that score. Now it might be up to me to hire an orchestra and all the rest of it,
Yes.
and be part of the package, and that's a whole different story. I can tell you, there's many ways to save money on this, and another way is through one thing that we're learning in the last 20 years is the amazing possibility of electronic score, not just synthesized, but the ability to synthesize an orchestra, sampled orchestra. And in my film, I don't want to give it away, but I'll tell you that there are live instruments in there, but there's also a lot of electronic instruments. And I'll let you watch the movie and decide what you think is real and what is Memorex, as we say. So, who knows? I could talk about it, but again, I hate to do that because then people have a preconception of it. What I can say is many films and television shows that you see these days are synthesized scores, whether you know it or not. A trick for a composer is to use some live instruments on any electronic score. I believe the ear will find its way to the live instruments, and that will help sell it. Just like in visuals, you can have CGI, but if you got a human being in front of it, the focus is on the person, not on the setting and the story and whatever that is. And again, if the music's really good, doesn't matter. In fact, this marching band tune that was in another show over the weekend was just done with before some of the electronic, what we call DAW, digital audio workstation. I did it on some keyboards, but my big drum set sounds like a marching band at times, and that's my skill set on there. And it's the drums that sell that track, not the brass. They're there, they sound enough, but if you think about a marching band in a stadium, it's not like high quality. It's you hear this kind of echoey thing, but the drums are just the fire and the energy on that. So yeah, many ways to look at that.
Do you think this COVID-19 problem will inspire a lot of films, either science fiction, horror, or even drama because a lot of stories happen around the world related to this.
Yeah, no, I think there will be massive genre about this for years to come. Now, I also believe there is an opportunity for hopeful, positive films that are going to be about creativity and survival and all the rest of that sort of thing. They may be related to this or not. I can't say. The opportunity right now is that for the first time in history, we all have a phone that has a camera on it. I mean, I've shot my own videos on phone or a little cheap Nikon camera that has video. Before that, I was doing Super 8 as a kid, so I'm really a filmmaker in heart. And I can never get music with it. I was like, reel-to-reel tape synced. I was doing just like what Lyford was doing. Anyway, that access is creating this incredible opportunity for anybody to be a filmmaker. Now that, just like in music, anybody can be a composer now. I could pretty much create a score using loops.
Yeah.
I don't know, whatever. And just like with video, you could take stock footage and make a movie as well. It can be done. I'm not saying these are good ideas. But with access comes a massive amount of supply. Demand is still there, no matter what your end project is. We started with a handful of television stations when I grew up, 3 to 5 networks, and that was it, and a local station or two. And we now have thousands. And distribution, I was just looking on, I don't know, it was on LinkedIn or something, somebody befriended me, and they got a whole nother distribution channel for people to do, watch films and download them right there. So, the demand is increasing. Whether those stay in check, who knows? You got to, it's something. Supply and demand is always the ruler of this. And music licensing, when I started, there were not as many people doing this. Now everybody and his brother can do it. And I advise anybody to get into it then they can, because it's one of the few places you can actually make some revenue.
Yes.
Yeah.
You don't think, because right now I notice a lot of streaming services in the United States. If we don't count Europe, like not very famous like Amazon or Netflix, but semi-famous. And many are emerging.
Yes.
You don't think it will affect the industry? I mean, regarding big distribution, studio films, independent theaters. I mean, the theatrical releases, it will be like an alternative or something going in parallel with the classic way of filmmaking.
I hope that theaters survive.
Yeah.
We just may have lost the Cinerama in Seattle, which was put together by Paul Allen, who passed away recently, one of the original Microsoft people.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing theater that had what's the three projector?
Yes.
Cinema.
Yeah.
What is it called? CinemaScope, or not CinemaScope? Cinerama. Well, Cinerama. And I saw.
How the West was won, for instance.
Right, and I saw that film there, and they needed 3 projectors and 3 people projecting. It was crazy, Now, when 70 millimeter came along, it kind of took care of that issue. But it had a wonderful round screen, and the music was, the sound was incredible. A nice big theater where you have a community meeting to watch this. And I'm afraid that may disappear. I think drive-ins are coming back, which is wonderful. In your car, why not? So I think I'm an optimist in the end, and I do believe by this time next year we will be looking in the rearview mirror of this, hopefully. And I think most of this will return. How many businesses survive this is another story. Television is going to only explode because everybody has access. It's going to get more expensive. I already saw YouTube television just send a notice out of upping their fees a little bit. Like, thanks a lot. That's all we need during the middle of a pandemic. But they're adding more channels or whatever. So there will be a lot more competition for that. Now we don't have just multiple channels, but you have multiple streaming services. You're going to have a ridiculous amount of that, and each network, CBS, Paramount, all these guys have their own little streaming network. My fear is things become so segmented that if you want to see a show, you have to go there or there or there. It's like, well, come on, man, I can't afford to join all of you guys. So I don't know what that solution will be in the long run. And as projects become more exclusive to those networks, then that becomes the premier. Those are the theaters in the future are going to be these specialty streaming services. So we'll see. Again, I don't know where it's going to go. Thank God that our festival run was last year, because it would have failed completely this year. I would have been different. I went to a number of these things around the country, and just even traveling anywhere right now is virtually impossible at this point. So You know, and that was a wonderful experience where I got to meet people and filmmakers and all the rest of it. You know, just really unique opportunity.
Of
What
course.
I will say is there was a small festival that had been a theatrical one called the Bedford Falls Film Festival, put on by some wonderful people in Wisconsin and New York City. And they did an online thing, and they invited me in on it, even kind of after our technical festival run had finished, although we're still kind of floating around in there. And they did a wonderful online festival. It wasn't a lot of people involved, but it was on Zoom. And I find, you know, I thought, well, I'll sit in and watch my movie and talk, do a Q&A. I watched, I don't know how many hours. I did like a 7-hour stretch on this thing, and I'm talking to filmmakers the whole day around the world, and people are having wine, and it was hilarious.
Yeah.
And you know, and the sound had its issues and stuff like that, but and you can improve that. There's ways on Zoom of doing all that stuff we're all learning about that can really improve quality. But I was it was unprecedented, the warmth and the support that happened, just like this, the fact that I'm talking to you, this would not have happened without this pandemic. So I think those are golden opportunities where networking really can shine. And you may find that you will get more contacts through these virtual meetings than you would have at a live festival. Because I got to tell you, as at the festivals I went to, they were kind of all or nothing, and a lot of them, a lot of films are going on, and you have big crews of filmmakers and their cast showing up, and you know, and then they just disappear. They go to a bar and that's it, and people are leaving their cards and tables, and I would pick them up and contact them later. But a
Yeah.
lot of times it was the festivals I couldn't get to that I had the best luck. There was a festival in Munich, Germany, that our film won best film, which frankly pissed off some of the other filmmakers. They thought we had ripped off some old movie. Long story, there's another As the Earth Turns from 1934. If you look it up on IMDb, this is not that movie. And the reason I know it is we have E&O and everything else and lawyers involved, and we own the, anyway, blah, blah, blah. And I had to prove my case, say, no, this is absolutely a real film. Anyway, we won that thing. But what was really amazing about that festival is they sent me the program and information with contacts from all the other filmmakers. So I was able to connect with them around the world and actually got some projects from it. So, you know, I think those are opportunities always to keep in mind
Yes.
on there. I do have one addition I want to mention before I forget. As a filmmaker now, I can almost say I'm a filmmaker, I guess. I am producing a biopic film about Richard Lyford, especially his first 20 years.
Yes.
I mean, if it becomes a series, maybe it'll be the first segment there. But what I envision is a 90-minute film or something like that about him growing up in Seattle and making these films. And it'll be kind of like if Andy Hardy was kind of a classic character Mickey Rooney played with Judy Garland, of them always putting on a bigger show. Classic movies. You know, let's put a show on in the backyard, and then it got bigger and bigger in Broadway and the whole bit. Watch That's Entertainment, you'll see that. Anyway, this guy was a real life Andy Hardy. So my I guess my log line is Andy Hardy. Well, my whatever you call it. Andy Hardy meets Orson Welles. So it's the idea. And so I'm putting that together, and I decided I was going to wait for somebody to write the screenplay. And I thought, the heck with this, I'm writing the damn screenplay. Because I've been researching this guy for 2 years. I made a mini documentary. I've been interviewing the family. I know more about this guy than anybody else at this point. So I'm taking a big leap doing this. We'll see. I'll probably need to find a screenwriter to actually rewrite the whole thing. It's going to be impossible to actually do. But we'll see what happens. And then I have kind of a quasi lookbook put together, outline, and my goal, I think, the more I think about it, the fact that this guy was a Pacific Northwest guy to begin with, is that this really truly needs to be produced in Seattle. And the opportunity for me is there's time now to write this thing out, to get it done, get pre-production done. And when times are right, this could be an exceptional opportunity for Pacific Northwest film personnel to come together on probably the ultimate indie film made out here. Oops, there's my junkie spam of the day. Anyway, so my goal is to kind of put everybody to work out here eventually. That would be it, and I think it can be done.
Yes.
So we'll see what happens, and get shot in the next 18 months would be the idea, and I think it would be a spectacular thing. And the fact that this guy was successful in his and not in the way that you think. He did not become Orson Welles. In fact, Orson Welles was almost identical in age. He died the same year, but he was able to create this intense output, especially earlier. He did wind up going into the Army and doing actually some pretty amazing stuff there. And then again, he worked his way into Disney and worked on Fantasia, Dumbo, and Pinocchio. Amazing stories there as well that I'm learning. And then he worked in the Mideast. And what he did there, working for Aramco, is he did films, documentary style films. One was about water shortage there, conservation, and the other one was about the tsetse fly, which probably saved many, many thousands of lives. It was a virtual pandemic. And because nobody had seen films at that point in the 50s and early 60s, they actually took projectors out into the desert and projected these things. And of course, many people had never seen films, and they were so awe-inspired by this, they actually listened to the film. That's the power of filmmaking like that. So what I think is amazing about this guy is, you may look at it as, why do we not know who he is? It must have been a failure at this. Not at all. As a humanitarian, I think he was tremendously successful. And all of that training he did earlier on about storytelling, which is again the writing that he was so good at. He really understood that he could put that even in a documentary that might just fall flat, that it had a wonderful beginning, middle, and end to it, and hit you. And he did many things like that. But he never got back as strong to narrative, which was too bad. I know he wanted to. He would have loved to have done Raiders of the Lost Ark. But the problem was, by the time he got back to Hollywood post-war, he kind of missed his time, and it was difficult for him to get back in, so he became independent. Now, that did get him involved in an Academy Award-winning documentary, so no loss there. But because he was director and not producer on that, he did not was able to accept that award, an irony in itself. Yet he was involved in the editing of that and all the rest of that. He was very crucial to that. So I'm hoping that the big question will be, for people to understand who he was, and hopefully, what his greatest successes were. And the first 20 years in his life, really about, even with very limited things, that you could tell a great story. And that is a tremendous statement for today, because if you cannot make a film necessarily the way you think you can because of the situation, the economy, whatever, that's incorrect. You have to scale your film to the situation, not the other way around. And that's how I'll probably have to think with this thing. I may not be able to make the film that I thought I was going to make earlier on. But in fact, as the Earth turns, it has a pretty good sized cast, but most of the film is done with 3 or 4 people. That's it. And you don't notice that. You have a big feeling about this because that was what's critical to the story. So I don't think you necessarily need huge budgets, huge casts, or huge anything, or even CGI to do something. You can do things very, very tightly. So, I actually did kind of my first shot at kind of just writing a quick script, shooting a film on my phone, doing it in my household as part of the a film challenge by the great B movie director of all time. He's I can't remember his name. Who he did Escape from New York.
Yes, John.
And, what's that?
John Carpenter.
What's that?
John Carpenter.
Yes, Carpenter.
Yeah.
Anyway, he put out a challenge.
Yes.
And I took it up, and I involved what I had, and I did it in this room and in my house, and it's funny film. You can watch it on my website at hartmanmusic.com. But I have a 16 millimeter editor that I picked up to view the film estate stuff, to check it over, and I use that in the film with even a cheesy special effect. So, what the hell? You do what you can.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Ed Hartman, and I wish you the best of luck in your upcoming projects. and
Thank
keep us posted about everything. And I suggest for as the Earth turns, you try as well some European festivals, some genre festivals, because they will be very interested.
you.
Festival, especially sci-fi and horror festivals.
We we actually were very well received in Europe where we were. I think they really enjoyed it. In fact, there's kind of a White House scene in
Yes.
that film that involves a lot of Europeans, and I think they really took to that as well. And I have my soundtrack at that point has a European kind of a feel to it. I took up pulled on there, but my goal is to still get the film out in theatrical
Yes.
places as well. In fact, one little thing that I just found out
Mhm.
is that Lyford was involved with clubs in California to get films out to shut-ins,
Mhm.
which was really touching. And one of my thoughts was, as the Earth turns originally before the pandemic, was to get it out into retirement homes, nursing homes.
Yes.
Well, and I can't really do that right now, but I still believe that's a wonderful place for it to be.
Yes.
And those are going to be, you may look at your distribution a little differently in that everything doesn't have to go through a distributor. You can direct, if you can do it right, you can exclude theatrical or whatever, and then maintain that on your own. And we've done that with this film, so I still feel like I can put it in festivals when necessary, and even if there's a theatrical issue, I'd like to find silent film clubs, historical film clubs, things like that, places to go with that. But I agree. I'd love to see this film around the world because it has a very, I don't know, it's what's interesting about the film. It's a kind of a, I'm not gonna say Armageddon-y thing, but it's your basic crazed scientist who's had it, and there's stuff from Star Trek in this movie. There's stuff from Doctor No. I mean, it's amazing how many films and TV shows this foreshadowed. Not only did it foreshadow World War II,
Yes.
just a small thing there. That I think it has great value in there. But what I think is amazing about it has rather touching finale to it. That it's surprising. Who you're sympathetic to by the end of this thing is quite extraordinary, and that's great writing. There's a missing scene in this movie
Mhm.
that we did not find out about until after we had shot it. Excuse me, finished it, scored it, mixed it, all the rest of it. I'm going to put it. Hopefully, it'll come out in a DVD,
Yes.
Blu-ray that'll have some other films that we've found as well. We're still looking for more. So anybody that has any ideas about Richard Lyford films or anywhere around the world that might find them, please let me know. This is massive importance to me. But anyway, this missing scene is very, very interesting. I'm not sure I really want to try and somehow put it back in, but I will put it absolutely in as a bonus, and then you can make that decision of going, would I put that scene in? Because it's just a little different, and it changes the pacing. On the other hand, it demonstrates a really key idea of what he was trying to say.
Yes.
So anyway, it's been a life project for me, life changing for sure, and I appreciate the sponsorship that the family has done. The great niece Kim Lyford Bishop has really helped me out doing this because this would never have happened. This is not a matter of finding some public domain film and adding music to it. This is a complete rarity in life, and I would encourage everybody to take a look at it. And it is free on Prime at the moment, so whatever that means. And and if you're a filmmaker out there and you really don't have access or whatever, you are welcome to contact me, and I will figure out a way for you to see it.